Keep it coming, keep it coming, keep it coming.
I'm glad I didn't sit on this.
Sit on the microphone.
If it was on the chair, it could have been a horrible
That would have been
accident if I sat on
exciting.
it.
Johnny, welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you here.
It's nice to be here.
And you just said, I think, outside when we had a couple of words, that you've just been here recently with your band.
Yeah, with the one person that's heard it. Yeah, I was here with the Vampires, the Hollywood Vampires, about 3-4 months ago or something. Yeah.
What was the reception like? I mean, you can see that people just completely in awe and in love with you. But what was it like being on stage playing with the Hollywood Vampires in Switzerland, in Zurich?
I mean, it was amazing. It was a gas. The crowd was very welcoming. They were very responsive. Had a good time. Everybody had a good time. So yeah, no, it was a memorable gig.
That brings me to my first question, because you said in an interview a couple of years ago that actually music has been your first love, and that you adore, being in a band and playing rock songs. How come? I mean, why did you fall in love with music, and what is so special about music in comparison to the great stuff that you do on the big screen?
Well, I'm not sure about great stuff I've done on the big screen. I haven't. It's very kind of you. I haven't seen very much of it, so I don't know what it is.
But all of them have seen everything, basically.
Okay.
So,
thank you. Well, thanks for going. Thanks for going in my place. I mean, there's a huge difference between my day job, as it were, making films, and then playing music. The one thing about music is that it's immediate. I mean, it's instant, and it's there's one take, right? So it's all about sort of trying to deliver something, some feeling to the audience, in which they, in return, give something back. So that happens in a very immediate way. And in cinema, when you're working on a film, when you're working on a set, essentially you do the bit, you do your work, and you explore various possibilities of the scene, so that you kind of covered all bases in terms of giving options to the filmmaker, and in that, once the scene is done, then once the film is done, it's I sort of feel like it's none of my business what happens after.
Is that in a way, because the way that you explained it and described it, is that in a way frustrating? That maybe the response that you get playing music up on stage is, as you've been saying, it immediate, and with the movie you can't really tell afterwards.
Yeah, because I mean, as I said, it's immediate. So there's an immediate exchange with the audience when you're playing, and you're communicating through notes and lyrics and such. On a film, you're in the trenches. You do the work. That you've committed yourself to doing, and then the reaction, let's say, of the audience comes about a year later when the film is done and in the cinemas. So at that point, it's like, that's long gone. So all I have is the memory and the experience of playing the role. So or making the film. So I just walk away with that experience, and that's, I don't know, sort of plenty for me. I'd rather not, I don't know. I'd rather not see my stuff, because it makes me uncomfortable, I don't like watching myself.
I think
it's
some
hard
of them
to
have
shave
watched
in the
your
morning,
stuff
actually.
plenty of times. Johnny, Talking about acting, keeping that in mind, that you say that the response is immediate playing music, what triggers your interest when it comes to scripts and characters? Because if you look at the variety of characters that you've played, it's just amazing what you have done. But what does a script or movie or producer or scriptwriter need to bring to you to get your interest?
You like to, I mean, it's you want to be surprised by something. You want to be surprised. You look for something that's not necessarily based on something that's altogether formulaic. You look for a character that someone has painstakingly written and offered you to play. So that's really what I get from it, is the actual work, the actual, diving into the character, locating the character, building a character, and trying, if at all possible, to do something, at least to try to do something that maybe hasn't been done to death, that's maybe just a bit different. There is a bit of, peril in that. I mean, but I think that that's also something that's incredibly important for an actor. I think that to walk in and do the sort of same thing every time, every film, every character is a sort of this version of yourself, and they are versions of me, all these characters. But to go in and, I think one must tempt the possibility of falling flat on your face.
So taking risks is important. In a
yeah,
sense.
I think if you don't explore fully, commit yourself fully to the character and to the director's vision and to your vision and the author's vision, you owe that. I feel that I owe it to the people, to try something different, because I'd hate to bore you, So if I don't try something that could be potentially disastrous, I don't feel like I'm doing enough of the work, I prefer when studios are scared.
Okay, I have an example for studios being scared. Let's pick one particular pirate, and Captain Jack Sparrow. I mean, you could have played him like a typical hero pirate, but you made him into this crazy, surprising...
Was he crazy? I don't know.
A great character. And there have been legends about, what Disney thought about it when you first stepped on set. Maybe you can, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you went in creating Captain Jack Sparrow, and how it went sort of from that.
The initial thing, I mean, Captain Jack was written in the original screenplay. He was just written as a kind of swashbuckler, just you kind of, pirate who swings in, sword fights a little bit, and then swings out, grabs a girl, and that's it. And then I had different ideas for him. Captain Jack was. This is going to sound weird. He was actually born in a sauna. It's true.
Captain Jack was born in a sauna.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. I was.
Whose sauna?
My sauna.
Okay, your sauna.
Okay. It's now his.
Okay.
I thought about this guy who I was just looking at various aspects of the character, and I figured this is a guy who's been on the sea, on the high seas for probably all his life, the majority of his life at least, and therefore had probably dealt with a lot of inescapable heat to the brain.
Makes sense.
So I cranked the sauna up to about 1,000 degrees, and I sat in there. I sat in there for as long as I could, until it started to affect me mentally. Which is to say, it was very, very hot, as was my brain. And then what happened is, while I was in there, in that kind of heat, you cannot stand still. But the worst of it is, if you move, it kills you. You know? So that in itself sort of gave me this kind of, yeah, I mean, his brain has been, parboiled to some degree. And then also, in terms of his body language, I felt that he would, on a ship, he would be fine. I mean, the thing could be, bounding away, but he would be fine. He's got his sea legs, but when he gets on land, he cannot get land legs. So therefore, he's a bit like that. And Disney disagreed.
For how long did they disagree? I mean,
Well, until the film was done. Until they were pregnant with me. Yeah, they had made some comments about, we did you do a film test, hair, makeup, wardrobe, all that, and you present the character, and when some of the executives came down to watch the tests and see what the actors looked like, there was this sort of large eyeball effect that was sort what's he doing? And then I got phone calls like, you've got to lose the things on the dangly things. You got to I mean, what's that sore on your face? And then they kept. Then I got phone calls like, please, what is he? What's going on? Is he just like, mentally like just gone? Has he just left the building a long time ago? Is he just incredibly drunk, or is he gay? And so my answer was, I'm sorry, didn't you know that all my characters are gay? That was the last question they asked, and they were uncomfortable, and I put it to them that they were welcome to fire me, and replace me if they wanted to, and because I wasn't gonna change what I built, because I believed in it. I believed in the character wholeheartedly. I felt that I felt very comfortable with him, and I felt I was onto something. And also the fact that every time they complained or gave me that, you could see them even peripherally while you're doing scenes, like the writers going, "That's not in the script." That's not in the script. And you could see all these worried faces. It actually, I found fuel in it, It gave me fuel to go further. So I did. And then I think the next thing I heard, I was hearing about Michael Eisner, who was running Disney at the time, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Depp is ruining the film. We're going to have to subtitle him. Nobody can understand what he's saying. What is he doing? Oh, my God." I understand their worries, because the film that they had released prior to that was the Country Bear Jamboree, which I was not a part of. So,
I mean, that was, I think, almost 15, 16 years ago, and since then you've made a couple more Pirates movies, and I mean, even all the rides at the Disney World parks, I mean, they're focusing on Captain Jack Sparrow.
It's weird, that, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, but I mean,
Strange.
probably the greatest thing is, and I think that is something that you do so well, and that is something that is in your DNA, is that you visit kids dressed up as Captain Jack Sparrow and sort of talk to them at hospitals and everything. So having created that character with all those difficulties and all these people who told you basically not to do it, how does that make you feel that a character is so dear to people's hearts and makes people so happy? I mean, kids and adults.
It was something that was completely and totally unexpected for me, because I'd essentially had a career of, well, with regard to the business, like in terms of Hollywood and the business and films that make money at box office and all that, I essentially had a career of about 20 years of failures in their eyes, you know. I mean, Ed Wood was a flop to them, and or you know, any of the sort of stranger films or whatever. I mean, when I initially thought about Captain Jack, another thing to keep in mind is I had a 3-year-old daughter. Lily Rose was 3 years old at the time. So for 3 years, I'd watched nothing but animated, but cartoons, you know. So I watched tons of cartoons, a lot of Tex Avery, and at watching these things, you start to think, well, why are the parameters so wide? Why is it that Wile E. Coyote, for example, when he's chasing the Roadrunner, he can have a boulder dropped on his head, and then you cut to the next scene and he's just got a little bandage on it. But people buy it. You know, that's the suspension of disbelief. You've got 5-year-olds who love Bugs Bunny. You've got 25-year-olds. You've got 85-year-olds who love these cartoon characters because they can get away with things that we can't. And so that was really my approach, was how do I infiltrate that kind of performance, or instigate that kind of performance where, again, maybe people from 5 to 85 or 95 or whatever can appreciate it, because he represents the side of us that we aren't able to get away with. He can get away with things that we can't get away with in everyday lives, you know. He can say anything and it makes no sense and people just go, right, you know. So I suppose, yeah, the ultimate irreverence was what I was looking for, and I found it. You know. But going to hospitals, oh, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Very sweet, thank you. I was so appreciative of people, you know, taking Captain Jack into their lives, like, you know, they saw something, they found something in him, they could relate to something in him, and it was all generations. It was fascinating. So going into hospitals where there's, you know, very, very, very sick kiddies, you know, little kids, and their parents, and they're facing adult pain. They're facing the most difficult thing in life that any one of us will face, which is death. So if there's any way for me to go into a hospital like that, and at least take them out of that, or you know, give them some kind of, you know, jolt of hey, you're going to be all right, kind of thing. You know, just fight it, keep fighting the good fight, and all that. And then you see the courage in their eyes, the courage of these children, and you see these big smiles on their faces, and then you look in the corner and you see the parents melting, just dying themselves. Yeah, I have to do it. I feel I owe that at the very least. So for me, it's satisfying to meet these amazing people, and it's heartbreaking. But if you've touched someone's life for just a second or a minute, I'll do that for the rest of my days. Thanks.
So we hope that Captain Jack Sparrow will return on the big screen as well.
Sorry?
That Captain Jack Sparrow might return on the big screen as well. I would like to touch upon two topics that you just mentioned. One is death, and the other one is, being able to say things as Captain Jack Sparrow and then being able to get away with it. You brought in a brilliant movie to the Zurich Film Festival, Richard Says Goodbye, and
Yes,
it has sort of in that sense, because Richard is facing death in that movie, and on the other hand, he sort of starts to get away with doing stuff that he didn't do before, prior to his to being diagnosed with a terminal illness. Is that something that you said is a challenge and the character that you like? Because it's interesting that he does all that stuff, but at the end, you kind of sense that he is a lonely person, and he just wants to be loved by his wife and his kids and everyone around him, and he's just,
Things go a little sideways for Richard, yeah.
What attracted you to the character? I mean, what did you like about Richard?
First and foremost, I'd met with the director, who's right here. Stand up. Stand up. This is Wayne Roberts.
Wayne Roberts.
Our writer-director. And we sat down to talk about it, and those meetings last for about, I don't know, normally an hour, and I think we ended up sitting and talking for about 9 hours, just talking and riffing, and the script I just thought it was beautifully handled. It's rare that within the first 30 seconds of a film, the main character is given the news that he's about to croak, like any time soon, and that there's no chance. And then, there's what I loved about it is he never took a moment to sort of feel sorry for himself. He never, he was. I think it's a very smart thing to do, to avoid asking the question why. If you're in that situation, why me? Why you? Why everybody? So I think in a weird way he was making peace with it, and from making peace with it, therefore being able to have a sense of humor about it, and then saying, well, man, I've never done this before. Maybe I should try this. Or these things present themselves, and he just goes, yeah, sure. So what you're seeing is the guy just trying to keep all the pieces of his life together until he can find a way, to wander off into the distance and exit.
There's this one line when he sits down with his students at the bar, and he basically says to them, "Listen, we all know that we're going to die. Why don't we fucking live?"
It's the death. It's the news of his death, his impending death, that gives him the opportunity, the freedom to live. To actually say, all right, this is what I got. These are the cards I was dealt. I'm going to make the best of it, you know. And were I in the same situation, I would do exactly the same thing. I'd just, yeah, go out and live, man. Go out and live and experience as much as you can, and you know, avoid, you know, bitterness, and experience people, have a good time. And that's sort of what he did, especially by trying to make his boss as miserable as possible. He found great fun in that. Yeah.
It's a great movie. You have to check it out. Wayne Roberts, thank you so much. And Johnny as the main character, Richard.
Thank you.
I would like to jump back to like one of the first characters that you have created.
It's vodka.
Yeah. I have gin. Cheers.
It's vodka.
Good. Have more.
I mean, what?
What? You know, the first collaboration with the person that you've probably worked with the most, Tim Burton.
Tim, yeah, he's a special breed, that one.
Edward Scissorhands.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You know, you've been talking about Captain Jack Sparrow and the way that you created him and basically went about him, and that you finally found him, and that you didn't want to sort of split with him. Tim Burton is probably the same kind of breed as you are. He does things that are just amazing in creating these movies and telling these stories. How do you two work together, and especially how did it come about with Edward Scissorhands? And was it sort of love at first sight between you and Tim?
I don't know. It was weird. It was strange. I flew to Los Angeles to have a meeting. Reluctantly flew to Los Angeles to have a meeting with Tim, because I thought there was no way in the world that he was gonna give me that gig. You know, at the time I was on a TV show that I was desperately trying to get fired off of, and they weren't interested in firing me for some reason. And I did far worse stuff on the television show that I've ever done for any character. I mean, you know, you show up on set with a George Washington wig and a rubber band tied around the back of your tongue, so you have a speech impairment as your character. So I started using, like, you know, character choice and saying, well, no, wait a minute now, you can't. You hired me to play this part. You can't mess around with my character choices. That's just not going to happen. Still, they didn't fire me. So I met with Tim, thinking this is a waste of time, and it's heartbreaking, because I'd read the screenplay to Edward, and literally the thing touched me deeply. I mean, like, you're reading this thing, and like, tears pouring out of your eyes. And I knew the character. I just knew the character. I knew what he needed to be, and so I flew, met with Tim at this coffee shop. I didn't know what he looked like, so the joint was packed, you know. And I'm looking around, and then I see this skinny, fidgety dude with like sprigs of hair sticking out all over the place, and he was kind of like, you know, playing with spoons and drinking coffee and kind of, you know, drawing, and then, you know, and I went, oh yeah, that's him. And that's the guy. And so I went over and sat down, and we proceeded to talk about the role and about stuff and our childhoods and this and that, and remarkably similar backgrounds. And we spoke for like 3.5 hours and drank, I don't know, 15 pots of coffee. So we're both zinging out of our skulls on caffeine. And Tim's arms are like all over the place, you know. And I literally walked out of the coffee shop chewing on a spoon, like this metal spoon. And I thought, well, listen, it was great to meet the guy. He's really cool. And I didn't hear anything for a month, and then the phone rang, and I just heard this voice say, Johnny, and I said, yeah. I said, you're Edward Scissorhands. A month later, you know, blew me away. You know. So then we went full tilt and into finding Edward, and Edward was sort of based on, well, newborns and toddlers who sort of see things for the first time, and who can find the beauty or the fascination with, like, you know, resin grapes or that, you know, or everything's new, you know, remote control. Wow. And a dog that I'd had, who was just the dog that I had was unconditional love, you know. Even if you reprimand them or scold them, and they sort of slither away into a corner, the second you call them back, eyes are filled with love, you know. So that dog became sort of my basis for the character, and I think it was the first time that Tim or the screenwriter Carol Ann Thompson had ever had an actor start cutting out like 85% of the dialogue. You know. They were like, actors always want to speak more, you know. It seemed to me that Edward had his vocabulary would be limited, certainly, but limited to in a kind of an innocent way. Like, instead of, I believe Diane Wiest when she comes and finds me in the castle, she asks me where my father is, and the line is written was, he's dead, or he died. And I thought that was maybe too knowing of Edward, so I changed it to he didn't wake up, you know, which I think opens up a whole other area of purity or innocence to the character, because death it doesn't exist in his mind, you know. He didn't wake up. I don't know why, you know. So and Tim was very patient, because I think you know, even the first couple of weeks of Edward, I think everyone was sort of flipping out. Even Tim was a little nervous, but yeah, no, it seemed to work out.
You've done, I think, altogether 9 movies now, you and Tim?
I think so, yeah.
9 movies.
Yeah,
starting with Edward Scissorhands. So how would you describe, you know, after all these movies, your working relationship and your friendship? Is it more friendship and you work with a friend than a working relationship? And is it completely trusting from his side, and does he let you run freely?
Yeah, he does. I mean, he that's the whole thing between the most important thing between a director and an actor is the element of trust. You know, that you know the guy trusts you, or the person trusts you. You know that you can. It's set up in such a way that you can try anything. Some things maybe you might fail, which is all right, you know. But in that trying things, you might just find something that hasn't been it's not prefab housing, or it's not, you know, pre-chewed food. It's something that's fresh and happens in the moment, you know. So yeah, Tim, our relationship, obviously as friends and brothers, has solidified, you know, hugely over the years. It's been, Christ, yeah, we did Scissorhands in '90, you know, and and from the beginning there was a shorthand, because Tim has a bit of a he has a bit of a stammer, you know. I have a bit of a stammer. So we developed this weird shorthand that I've had like, you know, grips or you know, electricians on the set come up to me and say, I just watched you and Tim, I listened to your conversation over the last 15 minutes, didn't understand a word that you said to each other. And in the same sense, his direction to me is to this day is still the same. It's like, you know, he'll just look at me and go, you know, and I get it, you know. He'll do something like, what if, you know, like when he, so that's there, right? And then, you know, and I'll go, yeah, of course, yeah, sure, yeah, I got you. And it's still that way to this day, you know.
Anything on the horizon with you and Tim that we can look forward to that you are talking about?
We've talked about a number of things, you know, and I'm sure there'll be something down the road that we'll figure out to do together. I certainly hope so. But Tim's one of those guys that if he literally just picked up any piece of paper or several pieces of paper and wanted to shoot it, I would gladly do it. No, I don't care what the subject matter is. I would do it. Yeah, there's something. I mean, he's my best friend in the world, really, Tim. You know, so very lucky. Thank you. He's very special, Tim.
Johnny, we've been talking about, you know, fictitious characters that you've created for movies, but you've also played real people, basically. For example, George Young in Blow, FBI agent Johnny Pistone and Donnie Brasco, John Dillinger in Public Enemies, the gangster James L. Bulger for Black Mass. Yeah. I mean, they are completely different, and the great thing about what you do with them is they're not bad and they're not good, but you sympathize with them and you dive into their story, and you at the end you kind of, you know, you want them to succeed even though it's something bad that they want to do. But what did you like about those characters, and especially knowing that they existed and the research is completely different? How did you go about preparing for those characters and roles?
It sort of depends on the character, and it also depend on what was available to me with regard to the preparation of the character. Like, for example, with Joe Pistone and Donnie Brasco, I had the opportunity to spend a good few months with him prior to the film, and he was also with me on the set every day. It was interesting because the months in preparation, and then also through the shoot, in the daytime I'd be hanging out with Joe Pistone, the real Donnie Brasco, and then at night I would be hanging out with these mob dudes. So in the day it was Joe and the FBI, and at night I'd go out with the mafia. Go to their clubhouses, go to their houses, go to dinners, and then the strange thing is I found that they weren't all that different, really. They just had different objectives, but they're not all that different as people. They really weren't. So that was incredibly helpful. And in playing a character that's actually existed or exists, there's a huge amount of responsibility to that person, to not just to be accurate for them, because yeah, I did the movie, but they got to live with that for the rest of their days. Like George Young for the film Blow, I went to what was the name? I went and hung out with him in some prison in upstate New York, and spent a bunch of time with him there and got to know him, you know. And he was super helpful throughout the shooting of the film. You know, get these collect calls from the prison, and it would be, George, how's it going, John? You know. Jimmy Bolger, Whitey Bulger for Black Mass was, I contacted his lawyer and asked if it would be possible to sit down with Jimmy Bolger, because there's footage of him, but there's very little of his, there's very little audio of him. And he very respectfully, I gotta say, declined to sit with me, because his reason was that he hated the book that the film was based on, which is understandable. But I guess ultimately, and Dillinger, who I always thought was not, I always believed he was not what he was made out to be by authorities and history. So you approach them with, like, Jimmy Bolger, if you think about it, yeah, did he kill a lot of people? Apparently so. But I don't think that the guy woke up every morning when he was shaving, looking in the mirror, saying, I'm the most evil human being on the planet, and I'm going to go out and just destroy someone today. It was actually, for him, it was the business that he chose. That was his business. And the only way to stay on top was to decimate the other side. And he was very successful. And even successful at splitting and getting away with it for 16 years, you know, living anonymously in Los Angeles. So again, like characters who are what we think of as bad people or whatever, they all have a side where there is a kindness and there is love and there is deep emotion, you know. And that's really what I sort of focus on, because it's an interesting high wire act, you know. It's a very interesting tightrope to play a character who is as violent and unforgiving, and attempt to make him human enough, with a heart. I mean, human enough to where the audience is a little confused at why. The goal is you want the audience to like him somehow, and so that's the tightrope, you know. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. I haven't seen him, so I don't know if it worked or not.
Have you had any response to the portrayal of any of those characters from the real people?
I had a very interesting letter that I got out of nowhere from she was the last remaining sibling of John Dillinger. It was his youngest sister, and she wrote me a letter after Public Enemies came out. And she said, I've seen the movie that you made about my brother. I didn't like it. I didn't like the film at all, she said, but I loved what you did with him. I really love the fact that you showed that Johnny, she called him, had a sense of humor, and he actually was more of a kind of a Robin Hood type figure, you know. I mean, he goes into a bank, farmers are trying to hand him their money. He says, I don't want your money, man, I want my money. It's in the safe, you know. So he'd get it. And that was, you know, during the Depression, or during, you know, he was like a rock and roll star, Dillinger. So yeah, you just try to make them human and take them away from maybe some of the kind of the poisonous biographies that have been, you know, laid out there. Thank you.
Johnny, before we start talking about upcoming movies, there's one other name and one other person that has been a huge influence and a great friend of yours, Hunter S. Thompson. You know, you met Tim Burton and you've had a great run, and you still continue to have that great run. And Hunter S. Thompson has been someone who's been very special and dear to your heart as well. How did you two meet, and what clicked?
We met long before there was an idea to do Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which was one of my favorite books. And Hunter has always been one of my favorite authors, favorite journalists, favorite writers. I happened to be in Aspen, Colorado one winter, and a mutual friend of this dude that I knew Hunter, and he said, you know, Hunter's going to be at the Woody Creek Tavern tonight. Would you like to meet him? So yeah, sure. So I showed up at the Woody Creek Tavern at midnight and sat way in the back, you know, to kind of stay out of the way. And about half hour later, I saw the front door bound open, and then I saw people. Then there was a commotion, and then I saw sparks, like electrical sparks, shooting out every which way. And I heard, "Out of my way, you bastards! Out of my way!" And he's swinging, like, in one hand he's got a stun gun, and in his right hand he's got a cattle prod, which is about 2.5 feet long. And the sea parted, like people were jumping out of the way. And he walked up to the table, put down his weapons, and put his hand out, you know, and just said, "Hi, I'm Hunter." And I went, "Yeah, Johnny." And we started to talk about, found that we were both hail from the same state, which there's only about 3 other people in the world that come from Kentucky, I think. So we talked about Kentucky, which he always referred to as the dark and bloody ground. That's the native translation of Kentucky. So we had a good time. We had some drinks, and then he said, "Come back to the farm, you know, come back to Owl Farm and hang out." So we went back, and I made mention of he was a gun freak, Hunter, and there was a nickel-plated 12-gauge shotgun on the wall, and I said, "That's a very beautiful shotgun." And he said, "Oh, you want to fire it?" It's 3:30 in the morning now. We have been drinking, and said, yeah, sure, I'd love to fire it. So he went and got some propane tanks, you know. And then some little boxes about yay big, look like a matchboxes, you know. And I've got a cigarette hanging out of my mouth, and he's saying, "All right, tape this box to the propane tank." Okay, I'm taping the box to the propane tank, and now I'm knowing that we're going to go out and shoot these propane tanks. So as I'm taping this box to the propane tank, I said, "What are these little boxes we're taping?" He says, "Oh, that's nitroglycerin." So I just, without even thinking about it, I just went, and I chucked my cigarette out of my mouth before we all went up in flames. And we took him outside and got about, 20 yards away. And he handed me the shotgun, so it was almost like this rite of passage, you know. It was like this test. I put one into the barrel, and ba-boom, you know, this 80-foot fireball shoots up into the sky. Good shooting, man, yes. And from that moment on, we became good pals, you know. He appreciated my shooting. I think Hunter. I think in me, luckily, I don't know how, but Hunter found a kindred spirit that would deal with him in all his madness and be a partner in crime, and because most people were afraid of it, and rightfully so. There were some rather fuzzy situations we got in that I probably can't speak about. But yeah, he would always. It was always like he was looking for a partner in crime. So I ended up going on so many strange adventures with him. You know, he called me once when I was doing Sleepy Hollow in London, and he used to call me Colonel Depp. Colonel, because he had made me an honorary Kentucky colonel, which, and he was very proud of it. Which, by the way, any one of you can become a Kentucky colonel. It's easy. But he was very proud, so he called me Colonel, and he called me up. He said, "Colonel, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm in London working, man. I'm going to need you in Cuba." "Yeah, you got to meet me in Havana in April." And I had there was a window where I had off, so I traveled to Havana and met Hunter there, and worked on a story with him and knew him. We were very, very close all the way up until his exit. I even built me a bedroom downstairs in his basement, which was I lived with a brown recluse spider, and after about 2 weeks, I realized that the nightstand where my ashtray was, and my matches and all that, was a full keg of gunpowder. So I went and found him. I said, "Can I show you something, man?" Bring him downstairs. I said, "Will you look at my nightstand?" And he looked at it and he goes, "Oh, Christ, that's where it went." I could have blown us off. I could have blown Aspen off the map with that amount. He was that kind of guy. So you instantly fell in love with him. He was pure. He was insane, but bright and quick and witty, and yeah, he was a great friend. And I think about him every day. I miss him every single day. He's yeah, he was fun, Hunter. He was always fun.
Johnny, we are sadly running out of time, but I want to talk to you about two movies that are coming up. One is Fantastic Beasts, Grindelwald's.
Crimes of Grindelwald,
exactly.
yeah.
And the other one is the one with Mark Rylance and Robert Pattinson that you've been working on.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us about the Grindelwald experience, and especially entering that sort of universe that you've been.
It was amazing. It came out of nowhere. That someone said that J.K. Rowling would like to talk to me, and so I spoke to her producers and her director, and then I spoke to J.K. and we had a very, very long conversation, just about stuff basically, and then the character and this and that, and she said something that I did not expect to hear from Jo Rowling, who's obviously, I mean, her detail to characters, her details to those worlds, that wizarding world, is astonishing. But I was blown away by the fact that she said, "I can't wait to see what you do with the character." Just to hand it off to me with that degree of trust, I was really touched. I was blown away by that, and so jumped into sort of located the character, had my ideas, and came in, and it all seemed to work out. He's an interesting character, Grindelwald. Again, his intentions are in his mind, for the greater good. But there have been other people in sort of world politics and such that felt the same way. He's a bit, yeah, he's very dedicated to his beliefs, and he's not a funny character. He's not funny.
But did you enjoy playing him?
I loved it, yeah. I loved it because that's really an arena where you can fly around and try different things and do things and approach a character with a lot more of to take someone who is hugely teetering on fascist on his sort of, yeah, he's a fascist, you know, I mean, he's one of those, but to play him as a sensitive and concerned, yet manipulative and powerful wizard, the possibilities in that world are wide open, so you can really try anything. So it was a gas, and I look forward to the next. I think we start the next mid next year, and there's a film that I'm getting ready to go do with. It's based on, there's a Nobel Prize winning author named J.M. Coetzee, who wrote a book called Waiting for the Barbarians. And it's to be directed by Ciro Guerra, who's a fantastic filmmaker, and it's with someone who I admire greatly, Mark Rylance, who is, I think, a genius and really, truly one of the finest. The best. Here's what's amazing about Mark Rylance: he's considered, and is probably the greatest living Shakespearean actor today, and he refuses to acknowledge that, you know. He makes sort of fun of it. So it's, yeah, Mark Rylance, myself, Robert Pattinson. Yeah, super excited. So we're going to shoot that in Morocco, yeah, towards the end of October. Very exciting.
Great. Johnny, last question to round it all up, getting back to the music. If you could give your life a rock star song title or album title, which one would it be?
What a lucky dick.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Johnny Depp.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Johnny.
Thank you for having me. Very kind of you.